since we've got a good contingent of guests, maybe it'd be good if we just kind of went around and everybody introduced themselves so everybody knows who's sitting at the table. I'll start. I'm Charles Dice, Chairman.
Todd Bundy.
Linda Eilman. Margaret Minnick.
Carl Madsen.
Richard Henry.
Susie Henry. Diane Manson.
Dan Schieffer.
Leanne Thompson.
Julia Decker.
Ian Sisson.
Perfect. Thanks. So the first order of business, according to the agenda, is review and approval of the minutes from the last meeting on August the 5th. I sent out some notes that I had made at the meeting and also after listening to the audio recording of the meeting. And I think I sent them out to everyone. So if anybody has other comments or recommendations for changes or to the minutes, please say so.
Do we need to do something to add yours in?
I think we do. I think somebody would make a motion. I guess since I authored them, I'll make the motion, even though I'm the chairman, that we accept the...
I had a correction on the second page. There was a lot of feeling expressed in the meeting, and so I don't want to be the only one characterized as upset in that meeting, so I moved to strike that. Other than that, I appreciate staff and the role of the chair in helping maintain a record that will help us move forward. So thanks.
So does somebody want to second the motion to...
Second.
So Todd seconded the motion to accept the minutes as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's a unanimous vote. Okay, so now we got Todd's... Todd is our liaison to the county-wide committee that looks after the entire county, and he attends that as the liaison from this group, the Southwest Coastal area.
Charles, could we just say, just for the record, Mr. D'Onofrio is excused from today's meeting, so we have 4 out of 5 committee members.
Thanks. Yeah, good.
On August 15th, Guy Boynton Building, Astoria, the comprehensive plan overall countywide committee met, and the initial round was to get reports from the various subcommittees. Robert Strickland represented his subcommittee by talking about county's plans to sell timber on the land it held. And Cheryl Johnson reported that from Northeast County that her group would like to a wider notification of upcoming projects using postcards. And then I reported as the minutes, the motions that we passed, as best I could ferret them out from the tape. And I don't know that I got that out to everybody, but I got it out to at least you guys and our chairman. So those were listened to, and then we moved on to other groups. So I was concerned about how we would be acting on these things. And Ian pointed out that all the subcommittees will review each other's policies on each of these goals. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. And that at some point we would agree on certain goals or certain policies for each of the goals, and then that would go to the county-wide group, or the county-wide group would do it by representation of the different people. So is that about right?
Correct. So the county-wide committee will eventually send a recommendation for the revised goals to the Planning Commission. And so the planning area advisory committees are focusing on the county-wide set of goals first and coming to a consensus on what those goals should be. And again, the county-wide committee will then make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. After that process is through, then we will go into the planning area specific goals. So first we're establishing the overall comprehensive plan goals that apply countywide, and then we'll transition into each planning area's community plan and sort of revisit and apply those goals into the community plan updates.
And that's good. That was a step I didn't understand. And as for how we actually go through the process of getting these goals corrected, let's take goal 1, because that seems to be one that we're pretty interested in. All of the committees will come together at some point and discuss their objectives in goal 1 and what they propose, and that will be it, or are these written minutes that we have going to be sufficient to go to the staff, and then the staff write a report?
So
how's that going to work?
Internally, we recently had our first staff meeting on goal 1. And we're looking at compiling all of the feedback we've received from each of the planning area citizen advisory committees. And so we're going to compile that and come back with a draft that we think captures what all of the planning area committees have suggested in updating the goal. And then each planning area committee will have the opportunity to revise staff's proposed updated goal, and we'll go from there until we get to a point where the countywide committee has something to look at and make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. And I believe the intent, Julia could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the intent is to get through all of the goals before a recommendation is made to the Planning Commission, so that they can look at the total package.
That's correct.
So we won't be sending them one goal at a time.
Right.
Okay.
And the reason for this is, especially as you get a little bit farther along in here, you're going to see all of these goals interconnect. There is this amazing nexus. They all work on one another. Mm-hmm. And so just because you're kind of finishing with goal 1 right now means you're only finishing with it for the moment. Mm-hmm. Goal 5, goal 7, goal 9, all of these, they play on one another. So as you get farther along, you may come back and go, you know what, we want to revise this. So we want the whole package of goals before we send it to the Planning Commission. So you're going to see these things back and forth.
Okay. But what I understand then is that the staff is going to write the material that the central committee or the overall committee reviews. And will they be seeing the proposals of the various subcommittees, or will they just see the one staff synopsis of?
Good question. So what we're working on now is updating goal 1 based on what we've heard from all 6 of the planning area committees. And so each of the planning area committees will see what we come up with and vet that before it goes to the countywide committee. And the countywide liaison is the person from each group that will communicate to the countywide committee throughout the process what has been discussed and suggested for each goal.
Okay, so there will be feedback individually from the committees to the countywide committee.
Right. We're not just going to take what we come up with and take it directly to the countywide committee.
Okay,
it'll be vetted by the planning area committees first.
Right.
Right. So it'll be a compilation, and that compilation will come back. You'll see everybody else's stuff too,
Yeah,
but you'll
good.
see yours and make sure that, yeah, this is what we said.
Okay.
Or, you know what, we said it this way and we'd rather say it that way.
And when it gets to the countywide committee, you will be there as liaison, or Margaret will be there as liaison, or both of you, and we'll have an opportunity to make sure that what this committee wants is represented.
Right.
So the minutes from each of the CACs will be up on the website. So like we can go and look at Elsie Jewell and see the minutes of their meeting regarding citizen involvement.
They're there now.
Correct, they are there now.
Okay, and ours will be up there and
Yours
other
are
people
now,
can
too.
see ours. So
Yes.
we can
That's
actually do some homework.
And all the meeting audio too, if you want to do extra homework and really get a good picture, you can listen to all the meeting audio from all of the different plan
We're
areas.
waiting for the minutes.
Good, thank you very much. That's very helpful. I think that's pretty much what I had in my report.
Okay, so I actually maybe missed my chance here. And I want to go back to the minutes for a minute. This isn't a correction to the minutes, so I'm not sure when to bring it up. But in reading through the minutes, on the bottom of page 2, where we make our recommendations about modifying the actual goal, there's 2 different committees mentioned, a countywide Citizens Advisory Committee and a Committee for Citizen Involvement. Those are intended to refer to the same committee, and it's very confusing to have 2 different names. So I thought perhaps we might have a consensus on which name to use so that we could clean up our recommendations and not totally confuse people.
So when I read Committee for Citizen Involvement,
That's what,
I said, when I read Committee for Citizen Involvement, which is what it says, in my mind I translated that to countywide.
yes, me too. But
Okay.
I think that language was left over from the current plan, and countywide was one that we came up with based on this process. So I guess if it's appropriate, I would move that we change the language in at the bottom of page 2 in the recommendation to be consistent and have Committee for Citizen Involvement be countywide Citizen Advisory Committee.
I'd second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that okay with the county? I mean,
So just to clarify, what you're saying is the countywide citizen advisory committee is the committee for citizen involvement.
you know, I struggled with that last time, reading, because one could argue that heretofore the county has considered the planning commission to be the committee for citizen involvement. And I got a little bit confused about all that as to whether or not that's truly the case. But as I said, I think this committee's interpretation anyway is that it ought to be the countywide committee.
And we're not talking about the current plan. I mean, this is a construct for the future.
Right.
That each region will have its own Citizens Advisory Committee, which will then, report to a countywide Citizens Advisory Committee. So it's not a reference to the committee that Todd and Margaret serve.
The reason I asked the question is the background materials for Goal 1 suggest that the the Committee for Citizen Involvement is engaged only in citizen involvement and not land use. And my understanding of what you are looking at for the citizen advisory committees is that they are engaged in land use.
Well, I think what we're looking at is notice and an opportunity to have a voice in anything, any county business, including land use that is pertinent to, our region.
So I just want to be sure that I write the correct language for Goal 1, Policy 1. And I think from what I hear you saying, it is the countywide Citizen Advisory Committee shall be the Committee for Citizen Involvement and shall consist.
Well, what I'm trying to move, I think, is that under Goal 1, Policy 1, the very last 2 lines of page 2, that we cross out, strike, Committee for Citizen Involvement, and instead put in countywide Citizen Advisory Committee.
Does that work with statewide goal 1, because I think we need to establish we need to define a committee for citizen involvement, is my understanding of
Does there have to
goal
be
1.
something with that name?
I believe so.
Well, we have to, like in the current goal, it does say that the Committee for Citizen Involvement is the Planning Commission.
Right.
So we have to have a statement like that.
Right.
And I also, you were saying that the Committee for Citizen Involvement is not supposed to be involved in land use changes, but if the Planning Commission is the current one,
According to the state, the best practice is that they're separate, but it's not against the rules to have one body do both land use and citizen involvement.
right, so we would still be like breaking the same rule. I mean, it's not a rule, but sorry, going against that guideline, that would be the same as the current situation.
It's a recommendation, it's not
Right,
a
recommendation.
it's not a regulation.
Right, but at least we'd be establishing a committee for citizen involvement that at least is separate from the planning commission, so it's maybe a step in the right direction.
So this would be the
Yeah.
recommendation.
I think if we capture what
Right.
Linda has proposed and made a motion on, that we strike that committee for citizen involvement and insert instead the countywide
Spirit
CAC,
emergency.
then we can deal with the CIC thing. My impression was we could deal with the CIC thing as time goes by, because I think the other committees are all going to be, the other CACs are going to be struggling with exactly the same thing. So I suspect that the CIC will sort itself out
I think you're right.
as time goes by, and I don't know that we're going to get anywhere if we try and sort it out here.
I think you're right.
I have a clarifying question though, because I've been involved in CIC. I've been involved in CICs in Portland and Multnomah County, and they were in fact citizen involvement committees, more to the point that you're raising, Linda, which is to comment on all aspects of, I would just generally call it neighborhood livability. This citizen input effort that we're all participating in now is rooted in land use planning. There are other aspects to neighborhood livability. I'm not clear if you're asking that the advisory group going forward also has a broader purview. And if it does have a broader purview, what's the legal basis for that purview, just so that the rules and roles and responsibilities in a legal sense are clear? Because this group is rooted in Oregon statute, administrative rule, and county ordinance. That's a clear purview. If you're suggesting something else, for me, that raises the question of what's the legal foundation, so that everybody knows what are the parameters, how do we proceed in a way that's legal, that really does involve people clearly and doesn't have unmanageable expectations.
Okay, your point is good, that the scope of this proceeding is limited to land use. That's a good point. I guess I don't have the exact answer, except that why not? I mean, if we had a committee, why wouldn't they be able to comment on, road improvements or, anything else to think other things, but why not?
I've done that.
But,
My point is, we had a legal basis.
Just to express the intent, I think the community wants to know what's going on before things happen, and they want an opportunity to have a voice, and I don't think that's limited to land use, but maybe for this purpose, this committee it is,
So understood. It's just that having done what you're describing and enjoyed that process and thought it fruitful and productive, generally speaking, I'm for that. We in Portland and Multnomah County had a legal basis for it, so that if this group wants to recommend that there be some kind of broader input, I would suggest that you might want to think about making that recommendation and then getting some kind of legal ruling from legal counsel related to the county about what it would take to define that and empower that.
maybe you could help us with directing us to Multnomah
Heck
County.
Heck yeah.
This information.
Heck yeah.
I have,
So are
I
we
think we're
agreed
talking
on
about
the
same
wording
thing.
for this now?
So, Linda moved. I'm sorry, please remind me so I can have my notes correct. Did we have a second?
I think
Yes.
Todd
I did say-
seconded.
Todd seconded?
Yes.
And I think we already said all in favor, but we'll not do it again. All in favor?
I
Thank you.
I have one more that came to mind. In the meeting up in Astoria, there was a question about our proposal or our propositions, saying that all type 1 permits would become reviewed. And the question was, are you talking about everything that somebody wants to do with their house? And I suggested that probably interior revisions would not be included in that announcement. And Linda, that's really up to you to say. Because you proposed that all type 2 have this 10-day period of waiting, or after it had been announced to us.
Well,
And that really should only pertain probably to exterior changes.
are you referring to this
Yes.
section here? Well, I don't think this was part of a motion, but I think I said that
Well, then I'm referring to the motions that we had.
that what would be desirable is that for all land use applications, all permit applications, that there be notice and a 7-day waiting period, either before the permit's granted or before it goes into effect, including type 1s, so that we would have an opportunity to know about it and comment before trees are cut down or construction starts or whatever. And I know that you guys said, well, that would change how things are done, but you know, this process is aspirational. We're revising the comprehensive plan, and we're only restricted by the statutes and the administrative rules. So I think we can think outside the box. There's nothing wrong with having ideas that reflect what the community wants, even if it's not the way it's currently done.
And I remember your motion as being exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
And I, at the time, I'm in agreement with that. I see Todd's point, certainly. But I suspect that after all of this round-robin discussions, by the time we actually get presenting something to the Planning Commission, we will have had a very in-depth discussion about exterior versus interior. So since yours is inclusive, I'm certainly comfortable with moving forward with it, even though I suspect it'll get whittled down as we go forward.
I'm not, and here's the reason. I think that if we shoot too high or too inclusive in this case, our proposals become looking like they're ridiculous. And I mean, the question came to me in this way. You mean you want everybody that wants to paint their or change an electrical outlet have to come have a 7-day waiting period? Well, certainly not. And you would say yes. See, I would say certainly not. And anything interior, how does that impact the neighborhood? So I would just...
Anything that needs a permit. You know, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe Dan can correct me, or you can, Todd. But when we had the Arch Cape Rural Overlay, we got, I mean, the surrounding neighbors got notice of everything, all type 1s.
I don't think they got notification
Yeah,
of building
and
permits,
so did the
which is
committee.
what we're talking about.
The committee, that's what you didn't like, is that the committee got to weigh in on every little shed that somebody was building and things. It was kind of overdone, but we did, as a community, learn about them before they went into effect. And the surrounding neighbors did too. So there must be a way to do this to let people know what's happening and give them a chance to comment before things happen, especially because type 1 includes, clearing lots and building houses.
To Todd's point, the distinction isn't so much type 1 versus type 2, because type 1 includes exterior things that the neighbors do care about. Mm-hmm. My recollection is that the design review parameters did not include interior work only, changing a kitchen faucet or painting your living room. But it did not include all type 1 matters, such as an exterior shed, which were very much a matter of concern to the neighbors. So type 1, type 2 isn't necessarily a constructive boundary, but I understand that Todd's point is directed not to type 1, type 2, but only to interior versus
Exterior.
versus not interior.
Right.
Does type 1 cover interior remodel?
Yes.
So
I didn't even know
a
that.
type 1 permit could include an interior alteration. It could include a change in use. It could include an exterior alteration. It wouldn't necessarily involve a physical alteration at all. For example, a home occupation would be a type 1 application in some cases. In some other cases, it's a type 2. But there's not necessarily any physical alteration happening inside or outside the building. It's a land use permit. And so I think it's important, too, to draw a distinction between a building permit application and a land use permit application.
Okay, I accept that. I don't care about internal remodels or anything that wouldn't affect the neighbors.
Okay, that's important.
But I do care about type 1 residential construction where they, get a permit over the counter and clear a lot. And the way you know it's happening is that suddenly the lot has been clear cut. So I don't know, I'm sure that if this idea gained traction, it could be refined.
But I think for the record, we'd ought to be on record saying it's exterior changes that we're concerned about, not interior.
Are you okay with that, Linda?
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So, are we ready to... Wait, the next item is questions for staff. I'm not exactly sure what that... You mean if we have questions, we should ask them now?
I thought that was something that you added.
That was something you requested to be placed on the agenda as a standing agenda item. So if you have questions lingering from the previous meeting, then you can ask us and we will try our best to answer them.
Good.
It's helpful if we know them ahead of time so that we become prepared.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any such questions from last time.
Okay.
Although I have plenty of questions from this time.
Okay, can we ask you questions about this goal that we're supposed to be discussing today?
Yeah, so
When you're ready to move into it.
Right, when you're ready to move into it, I can give a quick overview as well. Basically, I was going to go over the Goal 2 background report, which was this document in your packets. And so I'm assuming you've already read that. I was just going to hit a few key points. But in the interest of saving time, if you just wanted to jump into your questions, we can do that as well.
For this time, I was going to hold my questions until you did that.
I would like your overview.
Okay.
Yeah.
But first, we've got, is Dean Karen be here or not be
No.
here?
So that has changed the road improvement requirements. It's one of those things where that was developing in Public Works, and we thought there was maybe an opportunity for him to make a presentation. And then they pulled it back and decided they wanted to look at it some more. So they're not ready to talk.
Okay, well, that's good. I'll cross that one off.
Cross that one off, yeah. Dean will not be here.
Where's that little report? It's in here somewhere toward the end.
Yeah, it's back at the end.
For some reason, it's buried at the back of the materials that I handed out last week.
Yeah, it seemed like maybe the materials were sort of in the reverse order.
It's possible
Yeah.
that happened.
Oh, that looks like it.
That's okay, I see it.
There.
There it is. So, Ian, if you want to lead us through. Sure. And then maybe we can ask questions, because I got a lot of them.
So, as most of you know, or all of you know, Oregon developed a statewide land use planning system back in the 1960s and 70s. Senate Bill 100 was the mechanism that established it and mandated every city and county in Oregon to have a comprehensive plan. And it established the beginning of the statewide planning goals. They weren't all adopted right then at the same time. Goal 2 is related to land use, and it requires each local government in Oregon to have and follow a comprehensive land use plan and implementing regulations. So that leads to a question Charles brought up before the meeting about what's the relationship between the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance, which is what implements the comprehensive plan as far as land use regulations go. So the county plan must be consistent with the statewide planning goals, and special district and state agency plans have to be coordinated as well with the comprehensive plan. So goal 2 lays out this framework for what needs to be addressed in the comprehensive plan and in the implementing ordinance. So in Clatsop County, our comprehensive plan was originally acknowledged in 1980. The state required periodic review from 1981 to 2007. And so the comprehensive plan has been updated since it was originally adopted in 1980, but it's only been updated piecemeal, and so the plan has not seen a wholesale revision, but that is what we are doing now. We're going through and doing the wholesale revision, looking at each of the 19 statewide planning goals again. So the last periodic review that we had for Clatsop County was in 2003, and as it says here in this background report, that review did not address all 18 goals, choosing instead to focus on amendments to those goals that would allow the creation of the rural communities, Arch Cape being one, and being the only one in the southwest coastal planning area. So that was when the Arch Cape Rural Community Residential Zone was established, and so that was the last periodic review in 2003. There's some more information about the rural communities, some more background about how and why those were established. And so a rural community is essentially an unincorporated community consisting of permanent residential dwellings, also has other land uses, at least 2 other land uses, providing commercial, industrial, or other public uses to the community. The purpose of unincorporated communities rule is to establish a statewide policy for the planning and zoning of unincorporated communities, recognizing the importance of those communities. And so again, Arch Cape is one of those, and the rural community residential zoning is what implements that program. There's also some information here about urban growth boundaries, which I won't get into too much, but we have 5 in Clatsop County. That's Astoria, Warrenton, Cannon Beach, Seaside, and Gearhart. And we have management agreements with each city within those urban growth boundaries. So an urban growth boundary includes land that may not be part of the city limits, and the jurisdiction for land use in Clatsop County over those areas of land that are in an urban growth boundary but outside of city limits falls on the cities. So code enforcement, land use regulations are up to the cities within the urban growth boundaries per our agreements. And the last bit of the background report covers goal exceptions. And so for those of you, I think all 4 committee members were at the workshop on Monday on goals 3 and 4. Tim Murphy did a pretty good job of explaining what a goal exception is. And we can go over that in more detail if needed. But essentially, a goal exception is taken when a local government may not be able to comply with one or more of the statewide planning goals due to either existing conditions or because there's a particular need that exists in a community that needs to be addressed. And so, again, when the statewide land use planning system was developed for the county purposes, the county needed to address all of the goals on all of the land. And so there were certain areas that had already been developed for residential developments with lots that were very small and more urban. Arch Cape is a great example. And so in applying the rural zoning, and there are still cases like this in many areas, you'll have like the RA2 zone or the RA5 zone in an area. So those zones require a 2 or a 5 acre minimum lot size. But in reality, the lots that have been developed over history are much, much smaller than that, sometimes 10,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet. And so the goal exception process would say those areas are built and committed to residential development at a higher density than the rural zoning. And so they need the rural community residential zoning, or they need to be part of a rural community. And so an exception would be taken to goals 3 and 4 primarily. So along the Clatsop Plains in particular, we have a lot of goal 3-4 exception areas, which basically accommodate that residential development to continue because those areas have already historically been developed in that way, and farming and forestry is not practical. So that's a brief overview of goal exceptions. The other goal, I believe, for Arch Cape, or goals that were accepted for Arch Cape were 17 and 18, which involve the estuary and estuarine resources and beaches and dunes. And so it allowed, the exception to goal 18, I believe, allowed protective structures to exist. And so there's some more information there. It says here, for example, in Ordinance 03-10 to be successfully adopted, there had to be exceptions taken to goals 3, 4, 5, which is open space and natural resources, 14, which is urbanization, and 18, which is beaches and dunes.
Ian, could
Yes.
I interrupt to ask you something? Wasn't able to be there Monday because that's when AOC meets in Salem. So urbanization, is there any contemplation given to the fact that Airbnb and Vacasa and all of the turning of residences into business represents urbanization in rural areas? Is that on anybody's radar screen?
Not that I've personally heard about.
Except that personally everybody is experiencing it.
Right.
That's the point. Everybody's experiencing it, but it hasn't risen to the level where neighborhood livability is able to address it. The structures for neighborhood livability, including the land use code, have not evolved to the point to be able to address those real challenges and concerns. So is there any way that this committee, if it should choose to do that, could speak to that? And maybe, Charles, that gets at your questions, but I just want to raise that.
It's one of them for sure.
Okay, all right, then I'll keep quiet, but that's what, when I hear you, that's immediately springs to mind.
Well, I
So-
see stuff like that in the discussion items, so
Okay.
that's probably something you want to put in there.
It's up to the committee what they want to discuss in regard to Goal 2. We will also have a separate meeting later on, probably about a year from now, on goal 14, if we continue to move at the pace we're currently moving at. That discussion might be about a year out. But if that's something that you want to get into with goal 2, it certainly seems like it's related, and it would be up to you to discuss that.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just kind of launch into my questions and what gave rise to my questions, because tackling this topic and this package was a bit daunting, in the sense that goal 2 in land use planning is an awful big subject, and being an engineer, I kind of like to break things down into digestible bites and digest it one bite at a time. So I was kind of struggling with where to go with goal 2, and I think our committee likes to come out with specific recommendations and resolutions, just as we did with goal 1, where we had, a number of resolutions that we passed, making specific recommendations to the rest of the committees.
Charles, before you start on your list, could I ask staff something?
Sure.
I too had to struggle with this packet, but what I was looking for, and I had to end up going online to find, were the goals and the administrative rules. That the administrative rule, I eventually found one of them, but I'm wondering if with each goal you could provide us with the statutes that adopt the goal, and with the administrative rules that interpret the goal, so that we know what our box is and within which we need to operate. This is all the implementation stuff.
So we do have that in the packet.
Yeah,
It was at the
OAR
very
back in the back.
There, but I didn't find that.
It was past here.
Way back in the back.
In the very back. That's why I said it was backwards. Because it seemed to me like it'd be most useful to read this and then read what the current comprehensive plan says.
So way back in the back.
Well, actually, the background report first.
Chapters. There you go.
Where
Chapter
is the
660.
actual goal?
So the actual goal, the statewide goal or the county goal? We have both in the packet.
Keep
I
flipping.
looked at this.
Keep flipping.
I had to look up 22, Division 22.
So OAR Chapter 660 is in there, I think, in its entirety.
Okay.
And that's the interpretation of the goal 2 exception process.
Okay, well then
Which is a
maybe you
big
could
piece
put it at the beginning.
Sure, so for goals 3 and 4, we'll be
This
sure
one
to
was
put that up
pretty tiring by the
front
time we got to the end of it.
and make it very clear. So here's the statewide planning goal is here.
No,
For me, it was like
That's
the
still
last
the-
thing in my packet.
that's the OAR.
This is Oregon statewide planning goals and policies, or planning goals and guidelines, goal 2, land use planning.
OAR 660-015.
Yeah, I'm looking for ORS. Well, that's okay. The actual goal itself.
So I believe this is the goal itself, is it not?
That's the rules. That's okay, because for this one, it isn't very controversial. It just,
No, but this
the
is...
goal says you need to have a plan.
So she's probably talking, we can
So you're
get
talking about the
that.
statute.
Relevant
versus the
ORS
implementing
and OAR.
regulation.
Right, so
Talking
she
about
wants both the
step
ORS
versus
and the
the
OAR.
administrative rules.
Got it.
Yeah.
Would you be happy with a link to the ORS
Sure.
rather than the actual
Or even just the
document?
number of the
Okay.
statutes that the county says apply, so
Okay.
that we can.
It's just the ORS has a tendency to be 600 or 700 pages sometimes. Some of them.
Not with
Well-
respect to a goal, it doesn't.
Yeah, the goal is just one statute, or
It's
just,
probably a paragraph.
it's not very long, so.
Okay. I may be thinking of something different. We can provide
Okay.
that.
Anything else, Linda?
No, that was my request.
Okay. So kind of back to the, as I said, I had a lot of questions. So what I did is, and I made a handout for the committee members about, that I want to kind of explain, as well as to the staff people. And I got extra handouts if anybody else wants handouts. But these were just kind of my top of mind thoughts of things that I would consider to be planning items that might fall under what we're talking about in Goal 2. And I'm going to look to the other committee members and to staff to give some guidance on whether this is the right place to address those topics or whether there's some other place to address those topics. But certainly when I read Goal 2 and I read the various documents in the packet, I was struck that this might be an opportunity where we could address things like that have come up for, like livability, quality of life, the fact that we've got a community here that has certain attributes, both geographical, topographical, climatological, that make it a really, really attractive place for people to live, and that's why people have come here and invested money and developed their homes and want to live here. And I think as part of our comprehensive plan, we would like to make sure that those qualities get protected. And anyway, so this was my top of mind list of things that might help do that.
I think we could take this list and divide it into two categories. One that pertains strictly to our southwest coastal area, which, if I understand Ian correctly, would be something we discuss later on. Is that correct, Ian? And then those that pertain to the planning effort that we're making now that would maybe reflect on the whole county. So if you'd want to do that, it's your list. If you'd want to go through it and say this pertains to the whole county and this does not, you might do it by item number even. But
Charles, could I ask you, I was down on the beach this weekend and someone had constructed a fire pit up on the rocks. I see things about water and trees, roads. I don't see anything about fire. I'm very concerned about folks coming here and building fires within reach of vegetation that are illegal, but who has time to patrol all the time. And thinking about a lot of issues that play into increased wildfire risk, it seems to me that the human causes of wildfire, including those inappropriate or illegal fires that are on the beach, where they're up on the rocks so that the sparks go. I've checked with the Oregon Department of Forestry. They say no. We say that the fires, beach fires, have to be below the high tide line so that when the tide comes in, the tide extinguishes all those fires. People are not doing that. I mean, this was an elaborate fire pit. This is about 20 inches tall and about 6 feet in diameter, and people had pulled in logs so they could look at the fire. I mean, it's part of the visitor recreational experience, I think, and in my mind, at least, it presents a danger to the lives and structures that are here.
It sounds like that's already illegal.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with.
So,
but if we're looking
the
at
concern.
what goes into the plan, for me, we're going to see, with climate change, we're going to see increasing risks of wildland-urban interface fires, which is us.
yeah.
And so if we're looking at a planning document and we talk about the goals and we talk about these other considerations, in my mind, fire rises to the level of a serious consideration. So I just offer that for your You're the committee, I'm just
Okay.
For
giving
that
you-
kind of issue, are we allowed to have like recommendations about more enforcement of rules, or is that like totally outside of the purview?
Well, you might have a
That's
goal
plan.
that, you know, is an overarching sort of like, this is an aspiration, and then policies that might be used to help guide it with an eye toward, you know, changes that might come from the legislature and how that
Right.
might be supported by the policies, or might also be used to make recommendations to the legislature,
Right,
for
I mean, because
example.
if this is either state parks or like state police jurisdiction.
State forest folk. All I'm saying is, if we have a regulation,
Well, if it's on the
It's
beach,
park.
I think it's state parks, isn't
It's a county, so the sheriff would control this. The
Okay.
county,
there's a
Clatsop
bunch
County
of folks.
Sheriff.
it? Okay.
There's a bunch of folks.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, if we say it's an issue for us,
Right.
it brings us to the attention of enforcement, whichever jurisdiction it is.
Right, I guess what I'm trying to get at is just like the need for more resources in helping us manage those issues from the state rather than from, you know, like so state funding of their own agencies to
But-
enforce that kind of thing in rural
Some of these
communities.
are countywide.
I
some
think
of
it's
these are
part of
not.
it. All I
think
know
you
is that
need
when
to
I
make
approach
choices.
people and say, you know, these fires are illegal and they present a danger to our
Yeah.
lives and our homes, I'm
Huh?
told,
That's
oh,
not
it's not
happy with you.
illegal, or,
Okay,
oh, the
okay,
locals
okay.
don't want, I mean, there's this kind of dismissive attitude, so I see it as two-pronged, and I see it, again, I'm a creature of law, so I'm always looking for the law to support good human activity.
Right. Anyway, sorry for getting a little off track.
Yeah. No problem. It's a, you know, good input. So I guess the big question in my mind is, how do we move through goal 2 and come up with some recommendations from this committee that address goal 2? And I'm
Goal
hunting
2
for
is-
suggestions from the rest
Goal
of the
2
committee.
looks to me like it's strictly procedural. I mean, it's how to regulate things, not what are we regulating. And my questions that came up were like, okay, Arch Cape is a rural community and there is definitions for that. What is the rest of the Southwest Coastal Region?
The rest of the Southwest Coastal Region, let's see, you've got three different types of zoning. You have the coastal residential zone, which is to the south, which is the Cove Beach area, to the county line, and then I couldn't tell you what's in Tillamook. Then when you get north of Carnahan and this building, we hit some coastal residential zoning and F80 zoning, which is your forestry 80. You have your forestry 80 up in the hills beyond you here, and that goes a long ways, actually. There is some AF, agriculture forestry zoning, that is up more toward Hug Point on that side. There is, what else we have? Recreation management, open space parks and recreation. So those are your other zones that are in the Southwest Coastal Planning Area.
Norriston Park, is that it? That's in our region, right?
Norriston?
Oswald West? Is that what you said?
No, Norriston.
Norriston Park, she's talking about a subdivision.
Yeah, is that coastal residential?
That, Norriston Park, is that weird one that's
It's
AF?
between Arch Cape and Astoria, and Arcadia, I mean.
Yeah.
Right, I'm just trying to remember, because we have this very, very strange pocket where we have some ag forest zoning right on the ocean front, and I believe it's the only place in the county where it's like that. I'm not sure if that's Norriston Park or not.
Well, there's a lot of houses down there.
There are some houses in Norriston
Yeah,
Park.
yeah.
It's like down
And
Grand
then-
Avenue or something?
Is Arcadia in this district?
That's the
too?
coastal residential zone. Arcadia, like Arcadia and Grand, drops down, and then it goes along. I'm trying to think of, Fuses are down there, and Colley's place. I know the residents. Sorry,
Arcadia Beach.
Arcadia Beach, right?
Picture
Arcadia
windows.
Beach, and there's a
Yeah, well, it's not
housing
picture windows.
community in
Picture
there.
windows is to the north. So that's coastal residential zoning. That's CR. So it's got a 20,000 square foot minimum lot size. And a
So
strange
Cove Beach is 20,000
Cove Beach is 20,000
Right.
square foot minimum lot size.
So if I could make a suggestion as well, we have Goal 2 here from the state, which lays out the implementation procedures for Goal 2. And we also have in here the existing Goal 2 from Clatsop County, which includes all of the background materials, and it has handwritten lists of all of the parcels for which goal exceptions have been taken and background information as to why. So one thing staff is hoping for in the future is to have a more manageable document and a user-friendly document. And so looking at the end result of what our final comprehensive plan will look like, we're open to your suggestions on what Goal 2, how Goal 2 should read, what information it should include, and things like that. But being consistent with what's required of us by the state.
Yeah.
So I think for my list, like I said, it was top of mind mainly for things in Cove Beach that a lot of Cove Beach residents have said that they would like to see, and that relate to quality of life in Cove Beach. But certainly some of those things, some of the things on my list were generic and kind of speak to what you're saying. And the one thing that jumps to my mind that maybe this committee could endorse or recommend is something that's become very important to me, which is cooperation between, or better cooperation between the county and the special districts. So, I sit on the Falcon Beach Water District as a commissioner on the water district, and we are struggling mightily with our ability to support development in our community in terms of supplying water, adequate water. So there has to be some mechanism where the county and the special districts, we also have a road committee down there that takes care of all the roads, and the roads are also under stress from the increased traffic that we've seen develop over the last 10 or 15 years. But picking on the water district as an example, I would sure like to see the county take a lot of this handwritten stuff and work with the water district to come up with the maximum number of buildable lots so that we as a water district can do a decent job of planning for the future and knowing how many homes we might have to serve, because quite frankly the water district has tried that 2 times now on our own, and each time we've discovered that the county keeps approving stuff we thought would never get approved. So we're shooting at a moving target, and that makes life really tough for us in terms of trying to figure out how much water we are going to need and how to get that water in place.
So you're thinking a goal toward a buildable lands inventory?
Yeah. Or, yeah, that would be, that sounds like the right words to me, yes. Now, is that something that would appeal to the rest of the committee, or is it just me?
Say that again, goals for what?
What I did was just kind of say a buildable lands inventory, which is
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
where you figure out what your zoning is and how much you have and what your full build-out might be.
It's something cities in Oregon are required to have.
Right.
It's not something counties are required to have, but it's something that could be done for specific areas.
Right, so if we're looking at areas where we have certain stressors or pressures toward development, maybe there's a goal toward a buildable lands inventory. Is what I'm hearing from Mr. Dice. If I've said that correctly.
No, I think that would be a good recommendation out of our committee, would be to have the county develop a buildable lands inventory.
Now, you want that to be for all communities, or is that just certain communities?
Oh, I think it
Just
ought
in
to
our
be
area?
Cove Beach and Arch Cape. I'm sure Arch Cape is struggling with the same thing. I mean, the water district in Arch Cape is, it's not like they're swimming in water, right? I mean, they're also looking at alternate water sources, and maybe I think Arch Cape may be a little bit different than us in the sense that, if I remember correctly, and you can help me here, Dan, I think Arch Cape does have a max limit that was set by the county some years ago.
Well, it was set by, I believe, by the state, actually. But
Okay.
maybe that was as an offshoot of the moratorium or something. But
I think it
we
was.
worked with the county on capacity.
So maybe Arch Cape has that problem solved, but certainly we don't in my neck of the woods.
The agenda appears to invite comment from the public during this part of the session. Is that? It says,
Yeah, I think it's been our practice in our committee to.
because I think
invite the public
what you're
to
touching
speak
on
on.
is something that ought to be considered as a part of the comprehensive plan process, and that is the the economic relationships between zoning, planning, permitted uses, and the infrastructure to support it. And there was discussion earlier about rental housing, short-term rentals, and the stresses that they put on infrastructure, for example. And this is just an example that has been on our mind locally lately. The county collects a significant tourist tax on all of those short-term rentals, which all goes to the general fund, but doesn't recognize the infrastructure burden that occupancy or use puts on the streets and the drainage and so forth. So, people go around and hit up their neighbors for money to put gravel down and things of that nature. And I think that, although it's not required by the statute, I think that a policy could be developed that would attempt to correlate tax, particularly with respect to these rural communities where you have concentrated residential use without a supporting commercial use, to try and develop a correlation between the intensity of the use that's permitted by the planning and zoning and the revenue that's generated from it, and the county's expenditures for infrastructure, which is something that's normally not considered a part of the planning process except with respect to huge developments. If somebody's going to put in a really large subdivision in a place, there's a recognition of how the infrastructure is going to be paid for, but the same thing is not done with respect or considered with respect to existing residential communities. And I think a policy could be and should be developed that would involve a correlative consideration of the economic and infrastructure needs relative to the planned and zoned permitted uses.
Cost benefit.
Well, I hate to use such a...
Here's a question. What would there be any difference if short-term rentals were considered commercial activity? Would that change the way that the money came back to Arch Cape or was collected, or because that's
Sounds
really
like
what
an
it is.
assessment.
We've got a ton of commercial
Taxation.
activity outside of the commercial zone now.
Well, that's the issue.
I'm not sure how they allocate that money, if it's any different, if they get the money from a hotel or from a short-term rental. I'm not sure that they allocate it any differently.
Oh, I can tell you how they allocate it. The tax on short-term rental occupancy is the first 7% that's collected goes straight into the county general fund and pays for things like your salary and everything else. The next 2.5% is required by state law to go 75% to the promotion of tourism. And the county has a committee of hotel owners who decide what brochures and publications and advertisements they're going to use. And the other quarter of it is by ordinance directed to the improvement of roads and drainage in Arch Cape. If it's, unfortunately, the county road department hasn't had time to or resources to spend any of that money, so we haven't had many potholes filled, but that's what the ordinance says is supposed to happen. And then there is a percent's been added on top of that countywide to pay for the jail.
And that's a transient occupancy tax.
Right, but is there a difference between if it comes from a short-term rental versus a hotel? Or is it all allocated
it's
the same way?
Same tax.
Okay.
Well, I think one big issue in Arch Cape is, of course, whether short-term rentals are being dealt with fairly to the community. And I think Arch Cape is possibly unique in the county because we do have many short-term rentals and they're growing and we're generating a lot of money for the county and getting, our infrastructure is being harmed and we're not even getting what we're supposedly entitled to. So somehow that seems like it should be thought through in this, in the aspirational part of this and not just the, tweaking of ordinances part.
Yeah, it was kind of my understanding that coastal residential prohibited commercial activity. And so if you were to define short-term rentals as commercial activity, I think it would be prohibited.
That's been the problem.
A lot of people have looked at it as a type of home occupation, but it is up to discussion. It's not defined as a home occupation, but a lot of people have looked at it that way. Like a bed and breakfast also, where you have up to 5 rooms that you rent out and you serve breakfast. That is considered currently in our ordinance a home occupation. So a short-term rental is sort of looked at similarly, except it doesn't require owner occupancy here in Clatsop County. So you can just...
Well, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
I certainly hear what you're saying. As I said, I read that coastal residential zone document a number of times, and it specifically excludes commercial activity, although it also specifically says you can do a bed and breakfast, so that's allowed.
Right.
And
other home occupations.
To me, that's fine, but the short-term rental, I think, is gone over the line. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I thought with respect to the zone that's applicable residentially in Arch Cape, that a B&B is specifically, requires a conditional use application, but I don't believe a short-term rental has ever been subjected to that analysis. So I think to get a short-term rental license, you just ask for one. So I suspect that there, may be downzoning issues or something if the county were to suddenly decide that short-term rentals are commercial, but there does need to be some consideration of appropriate regulation beyond short-term rental ordinances.
So since this is a common theme amongst our committee members, anybody got a recommendation on what kind of motion we could make to include this under our Goal 2 activity? I mean,
well, do we have a consensus that short-term rentals is commercial activity, or is at least in the same category as a B&B, and there should be a conditional use because we could do something along those lines? It's kind of procedural, but yeah. I mean, do we have a consensus on that?
well, I certainly look at it as a commercial activity.
Are these ones that are like year round, like no one actually lives there ever?
Well, I'll give you an example. Across the street from me, there was a new house built 2 summers ago. Like, construction started 2 days after the new law went into effect that didn't have to give anybody notice, okay?
Okay.
And it was clearly going to be, once I saw the plans, purchased for rentals primarily because it was 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and each bathroom was inside a bedroom.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And it towers over the houses on either side of it, and it required cutting down every tree on the lot. And, you know, it was just a 5,000 square foot lot. It was not even 7,500 square feet, but it was, you know, grandfathered in. And, you know, that was the first notice I had that, things in Arch Cape have changed, because the only way I knew about it was because the tree cutting crew came over, you know, and there was no longer any notice to neighbors. But the owners come, I think, 2 weeks a year because they there's some tax law that allows you to have better deductions if you don't come very often. And so the rest of it, it's just with one of these many new rental agencies that have popped up and so it's rented all the time. You know, so I call that, to me, that's commercial activity. It's not awful, they're not bad renters or anything, but, you know, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of people stay there.
And that touches on a lot of issues, like the clearing of the lot, you know, which is also mentioned on your list, and the height of the house, et cetera, are like all kind of separate, not separate, but, you know, they're all things that can be addressed in different areas. But,
and, you know, each one of those things individually is probably technically legal under the current rules.
Right.
But taken together, the whole point of it was to put a small 4-room hotel in the middle of a residential neighborhood
totally.
under the guise of being a single-family home.
Right, yeah.
You know, that's what it's zoned for, single-family homes.
Yeah, it seems like saying that they're like approaching it from saying that their short-term rentals are banned would probably or potentially backfire or not work. But I think this way of looking at it as a commercial use makes a lot of sense, particularly if a regular B&B is treated differently. That doesn't really make sense because, like you're saying, it's basically a hotel that's being managed not necessarily by on-site people, but by somebody, you know?
I think of short-term rental as like you rent somebody's house, you're a family and you rent somebody's house, but a lot of these places have different rooms and things.
Linda, if I
They're
could
probably
just,
not supposed to.
I just want to ask a question about this place because do you believe that that the people who are renting the house, they're renting it to individuals who are not in any way related to each other and they are using it as a hotel?
Individuals who are what?
Right, like, you know, they're renting out rooms individually to different people, or is the whole house being rented? Because if it's being used as a hotel, that's actually a violation. We can actually do something about that.
I don't know. I don't have any evidence.
Okay.
No data.
No data. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
But thank you for letting me know.
To come back, I think it would be difficult to just say that short-term rental is commercial activity and you can't do it in Archgate. I mean, that would require some discussion and I'm not sure the community would support that. There are no commercial properties in Archgate that are presently not occupied by hotels or a thrift shop. So, but it could be a conditional use. It could be, somehow dealt with in zoning. But I think there needs to be a recognition that You know, I live in a house with 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and Kathy and I, you know, go back and forth with our cars to the highway and all that stuff, but the intensity of impact on the infrastructure that we impose is probably less than the house across the street from you that also has 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms and is occupied, I suspect, by 8 people with 4 cars most weeks of the year. And so it, and I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't think the planning process currently always considers the different intensity of use and the burden that imposes on the infrastructure, and could under goal 2.
The rules now are that we have our house, which is built as a family beach house, and then we realized it would be very helpful to have some help on taxes and insurance, so we started the short-term rental process with VRBO. We had to register with the county, so it's not just go in and say we're going to do it. And there are inspections, there are requirements for having it up to code, up to standard code for egress, fire protection, those kinds of things. There are limitations to 1 rental a week, and some people could be violating that and getting more use. But in our case, we end up with people staying 2 or 3 nights, and the rest of the week we have to clean it, and it's not occupied at all. So in terms of that particular house, the use of utilities and so on is less than if a family lived in it. Because you'll have a family group, it's always a family group coming. It could be a group with friends coming. They may use it intensely for 2 or 3 nights and then go. The other thing we have is families that will rent it for a month in the summer. And that's just one family that rents it for a month, and they stay here pretty much all the time, though they travel around. That's a real experience as to what these things are like.
And I'm not saying that all short-term rentals are evil, and I don't think anybody here believes that, but I do quarrel with you a little bit on the intensity of use, because certainly the water usage that we see with the short-term rental, 8 people there for a weekend use more water than a family of 3 does during a week. So it's,
And I suppose my fundamental issue is that, there are a lot of people that already live here, built houses here, been here for a long, long time. They came here because it's a residential community. To the extent that the short-term rentals start changing the character of the neighborhood, that's where I get pretty upset. So I would certainly like to see a way to manage short-term rentals. Either, if it were up to me, I'd probably ban short-term rentals. But I think they need to be managed in some way. And certainly other communities have done this. So Astoria has got at least a section of Astoria where short-term rentals are only allowed in owner-occupied homes. There are other communities who have capped the number of short-term rentals that are allowed.
We tried to do that here, and many of us were involved in that when we tried to cap it, the number of rentals that could be in the Arch Cape area. And the Planning Commission came down and had a meeting down here. Maybe you were involved in that, if you recall.
Was that in like 2002 maybe?
Yeah, it was probably 02, somewhere back there.
I was there.
Not 02. Well, I don't know. Anyway, it was way back there.
Yeah, it was way back.
And,
It was 20 years ago.
and the Planning Commission said, no dice, you can't limit it. What happened on that particular occasion, it was at one of the community club meetings. Maybe you were there. And we had people come in from all over. Like there was one guy from Reno, Nevada that owned a house here that was short-term rental. And they just made a gigantic fuss, and the Planning Commission kind of caved. basically is what happened.
And they swore they would sue the pants off us.
What?
They swore they would sue the pants off us. Not my term, not theirs. If the planning commission acted to limit what they were allowed to do, because they bought it to make money. They
Yeah.
accept money. That's commercial in my book.
Yeah.
It's a conflict with the zoning, but it doesn't matter in some cases what's on the books. You need to have something good on the books, but then you need people who are willing and able to enforce it. But there's also the level of intimidation that happens with people who walk in saying, we have money and we're going to sue you. We will tie you up in court. So there's a feeling of entitlement because of the property rights involved. So there's a caution, but it was an extensive and vigorous discussion with a lot of feeling on both sides.
Right. I know we have communities here that do limit it, and they must have faced the same kind of argument.
Yeah,
And
must have.
why can't we?
I don't, again, back to Linda's point, I mean, I think the intent here is to be aspirational and to set, high goals for what we want for our community. And personally, I would like to see us set a high goal in the area of this short-term rental thing and say either no commercial activity, and I would define short-term rental as a commercial activity in a CR zone, or it needs to be type 2 and we need to come up with some rules for managing, how to manage this in a more sensible way than we currently are. And I don't know exactly how to phrase that.
I have a question for Ian. Does this discussion pertain to our current effort, or is this pertaining to our future effort when we're dealing with local regulations?
Yes.
It would be implemented once we get to the point where we're dealing with local regulations. The comprehensive plan, I don't believe, would be able to specifically address or directly address what you're talking about now.
Unless there are concerns coming out of the other communities, groups. And I don't know I'm not sure that the Clatsop Plains group considered it. And we haven't had the discussion in some of the other committees, but...
So commercial uses in residential zones being an issue, and
it needs to fit somewhere.
baking that into the comp plan,
Somewhere.
it would need to then be implemented into the zoning ordinance. So in that respect, I think that's what Julia is saying basically is, if you want to set the direction that the implementing ordinance will have to go, then yes, you can address it at the comprehensive plan level.
Yes.
Good.
Then maybe what we should do is offer a motion that local communities should have or the county as a whole, should limit access to short-term rentals and not get into the specifics of what those limitations should be, because that would pertain more to detail.
Or do you want to recommend that that the county develops definitions that are useful for determining what is and what is not a commercial use in a residential zone?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'd like to see us say
That's
that for
good.
the southwest coastal planning area, that we want the comprehensive plan to manage short-term rentals
In some way.
in some way.
Okay.
And exactly what that way is, I suppose.
Could I offer a phrase, effectively regulate
Okay?
rather than
Yes.
manage?
I'm
'Cause-
good with that.
So what we'd be looking for, I think, is for a way to come up with enforceable policies.
Okay.
So we're looking for recommendations from you about those things that we would want to come up with enforceable policies about.
So like in the CR zone, short-term rentals is a type 2 activity and
Or something?
for starters, and certainly in Cove Beach, I'd like to see us have a cap.
And so that would be something that would be implemented at the ordinance level,
Yeah.
but the actual recommendation to develop this comes at the policy level.
Yeah.
But
I
I'd
think
like
that's
to be a
what-
little more
I think that's what
specific.
he's talking
Well,
about. I think
What
his
you
thoughts
develop,
are.
not just.
Well, we
kind
need
of
some definitions.
Delegate it to the county to decide what to develop.
Well, we need some definitions and we need some recommendations about that,
Yeah.
but it's like getting it started. This is getting it started.
Okay, well, back to, I think Ian's point was like, in this discussion on goal 2 right here today, I think we could come up with this recommendation, and then when we get a year from now, when we get back to talk about the specifics that go into the Southwest Coastal Plan.
Well, maybe they'll have a
Then
working
would-
draft for us by
Yeah,
then.
Yeah.
maybe by then, but then I think we could get down to the details of, okay, well, fine, how do we really want to manage it in Arch Cape? or-
Another thing on the policy level that this raises is how important it is to not focus only on countywide goals and policies, but to look at the situation of each community, because Arch Cape is pretty unique in having this short-term rental problem and probably other issues too, and I think that, I know in the past, there was a push within the county to have everything be countywide. No longer, can we have our own little committee or anything. But I think that there has to be recognition in the comprehensive plan that individual communities have unique issues that need to be recognized and
Captured.
Accommodated.
accommodated.
So to pull something out from the statewide goal 2 report, it says cities and counties must build their comprehensive plans on a factual base and follow their plan when making decisions on appropriate zoning. So the factual base could be maybe an analysis of the current impact of short-term rentals on infrastructure. That seems to be a large part of the discussion today about the possibility of finding ways to effectively regulate short-term rentals. A factual basis for that might be the impact or a measurement of the impact they are currently having on roads, water, sewer, septic, things like that.
Yes, but I'm thinking of adding something to the comprehensive plan that recognizes that different communities may have different or even unique issues. And I'm trying to get away from this idea that the best thing to do is have everything the same all countywide, because the rest of the county probably doesn't even care about this issue. It's not very important to them.
Actually, I'm going to disagree with you on that.
I would.
So, I'm looking for some language that we can recommend that the goal 2 include.
It's back to this, in my mind, it's back to this quality of life issue. So, again, when we moved here because Cove Beach is quiet. It's, it's remote, it's wooded, it's got wetlands, it's got animal corridors. That quality of life is why we moved here and why we invested here. And you don't have the same quality of life in, coastal plains. You may have a different one, but you don't have that one. And I would hate to see that altered by, for instance, short-term rentals creeping in and turning it into Rockaway Beach. That's not what we had in mind when we moved here, certainly. So I don't know if that quality of life thing helps any, but that's certainly my
I just think that we should say there should be something in the comprehensive plan that says that, a recognition that individual communities may have unique or special interests and issues that the county will recognize and deal with. And you
Well,
get that issue
certain
idea.
elements of the issue are universal countywide, and other elements of the issue are specific to specific places, I think is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, other parts, I wanted something that's broad enough that if another community has its own issue, it's kind of in the same aspirational zone that issue should be dealt with for that community.
Right, well, and
Understood.
so we do have the different planning areas, each with their own planning,
Community plan.
community plan, right.
I think Todd's got a,
Yeah, I would like to say that these look like two separate issues, and may I propose motions? First, to the one that we're discussing at the moment, individual communities have unique requirements. This should be recognized by the county comprehensive plan, period. Does that catch what you're talking about? Individual communities have unique
It's good enough,
requirements.
probably.
This should be recognized by the county comprehensive plan.
Certainly aspirational.
yeah,
Yeah, is that okay?
I'd second that motion.
What
You're the
about the
chair.
use of the word requirements?
Requirement instead of should?
Okay.
Well, no, just the use, like different communities have different requirements.
Oh, so what would you like to propose instead of requirements?
You know, conditions, issues, what was the word used about it?
Somebody threw out
Limitations,
What was it, Dan?
Somebody threw out attributes.
attributes, yeah, like so everything from like resource limitations like water
Julie,
to.
We don't want to list a whole bunch
No,
of
no,
stuff
no,
because then we
but
get
attributes. or-
attributes, conditions and attributes, would that be sufficient?
Yeah, I feel like that more captures the spirit of the conversation than requirements. 'Cause
Okay.
requirements sounds very prescriptive to me.
Okay,
Somebody want to second that motion besides you?
I'll second.
Okay. Margaret seconds. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
And your
You want me to
second?
read it again, Ian?
Please,
Yes.
Or I can send it to you?
for the record, if you could just read it,
Okay,
that would be great.
individual communities have unique conditions and attributes, period. This should be recognized in the county comprehensive plan. Okay, second is the thing about short-term rentals. Let me try this one. This is a motion. We recommend that the county, comma, through its comprehensive plan, should develop definitions and ordinance to regulate short-term rentals. How does that fit?
Well, they already have that. That's what they have now is not enough, I think.
Okay.
We need to broaden that.
Yeah, I think.
What did you say, Julia, before?
I forgot.
You talked
what
about
I-
enforceable
Develop
policies.
Enforceable
definitions.
policies is
Develop
one thing.
definitions.
I'd like,
I mean, what I heard was that needs to be part of each planning region's comprehensive plan. I'm a little bit nervous about passing it up to the county and letting the county do something countywide, back to your point of making everything the same. You know, we have unique circumstances here. I'd like to see our Southwest Coastal Planning Area have our own specific comp plan that deals with our own specific short-term rental issue and hopefully our own short-term rental solution,
Well, we will
whatever
have
that
our-
is.
We will have our own community plan. I mean, we will get.
That'll be an opportunity we have down the road.
Okay.
So, Linda, you said unique, and that means one of a kind. And the three of us over here are saying, you know what? Short-term rentals are having an impact on housing all over the county. I'm thinking it's more of a variation, and what you're looking for is policies that are responsive to local variations. Because what you're looking to do is to maintain neighborhood livability, and there is variation about what that means. But unique, again, puts a kind of circle around it, because somebody could say, well, we have it too, you're not one of a kind. And to the extent that we say we have common issues and we want to work on them together in a way that's reflective of our neighborhood realities, Because that's what I heard from your discussion.
Okay, unique, that's not an important word. That's probably not even a correct word.
But the variation, but the themes are consistent around the county in many ways. They're more emergent here
Right.
because there's more money to be made here.
So could we say something about like there needs to be a structure or a mechanism or framework by which communities can do this?
Even if you simply recommend that the county investigate ways to we need some definitions. We need to determine what actually constitutes a commercial use. It would be interesting to investigate it against other counties that have this problem, sometimes in even greater levels than we do. I'm thinking of Lincoln, for example, where the issue, I think part of it is getting to it through definitions, part of it is through impacts, as Ian mentioned. So what a goal might be simply to try and bring up that investigation and maybe some policies about guiding it so that we can get to the point where we can actually get to the implementing document and regulate it. But we're starting with this aspirational goal that says we're going to look at this and these are the kinds of things we're going to look at. And this is where we want to go.
And the advantage to that is that it brings to the table the people who hopefully would be included in a process so they wouldn't be so inclined to come in and say, you know what, if you do that, I'm going to sue you. But if we have conversations with them all the way along the line so that they're seen and heard and their considerations are taken into effect, that's the best way I know to preclude lawsuits, which are just a bad, expensive, blunt instrument of public policy.
Want me to try another one?
Yeah.
The county, through the comprehensive plan, is to have policies leading to enforceable regulations to regulate and limit short-term rentals. It's kind of vague, but it's kind of...
Well, effectively manage, I like the
Yeah.
effectively manage phrase. So
Yeah.
get that in there
Effectively
somewhere.
manage.
Well, I like using the word limit because that is saying
All
we
right.
do have a point of view here. We would like to see them.
Yes, we would. Which in my mind is part of effectively manage, but yeah, good.
Right,
Let's-
I think you're right. Yeah.
How about this? I put, okay, let's just go through it again. The county, through the comprehensive plan, is to have policies leading to enforceable regulations to effectively manage and limit short-term rentals.
Okay, works for me.
How about saying commercial activity within residential zones,
But now you're getting into
including
defining.
short-term rentals?
Well, that would say that short-term rentals are commercial. We don't know that yet.
We'd like
That's
to,
the problem.
right.
Yeah,
we-
that's
we-
another issue.
It's a step.
Should we
Kind
add
of gets
another?
there.
Yeah.
Why aren't they?
Should we add another statement getting to this, that we recommend this analysis or research that Julie is getting at?
Say that. How would you phrase that?
Recommends.
Leading to. I say leading to.
Right. Well, I'm getting,
Policies leading to enforceable regulations. Would that cover that?
well, I guess I was
analysis?
talking about so what does it say? Sorry.
It says that the comprehensive plan is to have policies leading to enforceable regulations, which for effective management and limit of short-term rentals.
See, to me, that's what we have now. That's
Right.
don't limit it.
It doesn't say that we recommend the county research or figure out the impacts of short-term rentals
Okay.
or look at whether they're a commercial use.
So currently a short-term
Definitions and
rental,
impacts that they were getting at.
a short-term rental generally is allowed in any lawfully established dwelling in Clatsop County. And so we don't look at any impacts as a criteria checklist when we have an application for a short-term rental related to water or sewer, or it's part of their application process, and it sets the limit on the number of guests they can have and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, if you have a lawfully established dwelling, you can establish a short-term rental.
So we want to change that.
You know, we should go back
That's
to
our goal?
the suggestion Dan
Yeah, I
made.
think that's our goal. We want to change that.
I was going to say we should go back to the suggestion Dan made, which was aspirational, which is that the economic relationship between development, including short-term rentals, and the infrastructure of the community needs to be considered. That seems to me to be missing.
So maybe we say that the county needs to do a research and analysis of that issue, like identifying the capacity of different communities to handle these short-term rentals and make policies based on that, or make that part of the approval process.
But we're trying to write the comprehensive plan.
Are we?
So we're trying to say what is, how would we like to see the world?
Mm-hmm.
So we need input from the county, obviously.
And
So-
the county needs input from you.
Part of the comprehensive plan process is background reports and studies and analysis. And so right now in our current iteration of the comprehensive plan, all of the background reports and analysis are adopted as part of the plan itself. What we are looking at aspirationally for the future is having background reports, but not necessarily adopting them, so that we have a thinner, more manageable, more user-friendly document. But something like what Margaret has suggested, the study, could be part of that background report.
Irrelevant.
Well, I support the study, and I support hyperlinks to the background information in the new comprehensive report.
Sure. So it's accessible, yeah.
So it's accessible. I wouldn't like to see it not available, but I wouldn't like to see it in the comprehensive plan either. So it could be there by incorporation.
So I think we're still on Todd's motion.
Yeah, I've kind of lost it, because there are lots of other things that come in. If you want to offer amendments to that, or it could die for lack of a second.
So reread it.
I'm going to read it just the way it was, because these other things I need to put into it. But the county, through the comprehensive plan, is to have policies leading to enforceable regulations for effectively managing and limiting short-term rentals.
So does somebody want to second that motion? Or let it die? Sounds like it's died.
It died. Okay. Well, I think we need another motion then, don't we, of some kind.
Well, that's the dilemma.
to
Well,
get-
play with that. Play with that one.
Well, there were two other things that we worked on in this. One was Linda's suggestion that the economic impact of all commercial activities be included in consideration for short-term rentals. I think that was something that you mentioned. But did you have wording that I might include?
I don't think it needs to be specific to short-term rentals. I just think.
Yeah, including,
You know,
I say
planning and
including
zoning.
short-term rentals.
Planning and zoning needs to
Take into
Consider.
consideration.
the infrastructure and other requirements and the resources and sources of revenue to fulfill them.
Okay. Resources, you say impact on, what were the terms you used?
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Well, what I wrote down was needs to consider economic relation between development and infrastructure. Development and infrastructure, or development including short-term rentals and infrastructure. I don't know.
And I think you need to add to that, though, or my suggestion is that you add to that the the source of the resources to fulfill those needs.
We talked about a correlation of the intensity of use and the burden on the infrastructure.
Correct.
To correlate that with the revenue associated with the commercial use, if I heard you correctly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a commercial use, it's any use. I mean, it
Yeah, I
seems
get
to me
it.
if you have a area of houses that pays a significant amount of property taxes, that the county ought to consider that tax revenue in terms of how much money they spend on the roads, for example, or whatever. I mean,
I got it. I do.
there ought to be a relationship between the planning and the resources that are
You want to make a stab at what you got so far?
Well, let me just try to get what Dan's talking about there. Well, would a sentence such as, planning and zoning must consider economic impact on the infrastructure of local community kind of be the
That's a
terms
short,
that you
sweet
want?
way to say it.
and the source of the resources to fulfill them.
Okay,
The source of the resources.
okay.
To fulfill.
Okay, we know that that pertains to water and sewer, right, Dan?
Any resources.
Any
Any resources.
Any resource.
Roads, everything.
Okay, let's try it again.
Yep.
Planning and zoning must consider economic impact on infrastructure and sources of the resources needed to fulfill them for each local community or something.
Sources of the revenue.
Wait, where'd revenue get in here?
Instead of resources.
Yeah.
Sources of resources doesn't,
Sources of revenue.
doesn't
not
Oh,
resources.
sources,
Flow.
sources
wordsmithing
of revenue.
it.
Oh, okay.
You're flexible.
Tell me
Okay.
you don't want it in iambic pentameter.
Okay.
Let's try it again. Now, this is the sentence added on to the previous motion. Perhaps I should read the whole thing so that it makes sense. Okay. The county, through the comprehensive plan, is to have policies leading to enforceable regulations for effectively managing and limiting short-term rentals. Planning and zoning must consider economic impact on infrastructure and sources of the revenue needed to fulfill them. That doesn't make sense.
Fulfill
I
community
think we're
needs.
just considering the second part of that right now. I think the short-term rental part, we just kind of
That's a different motion?
put aside.
Put it aside. Okay, that's aside.
For the moment.
But the revenue is to address community needs.
Revenue
And
is
that's what I
to,
heard.
revenue is to address what?
Community needs.
Well, just put at the end of your sentence where it says fulfill, just put fulfill community needs.
Okay, that's good.
That is
Mike,
what you said.
for what it may be worth to you guys, my suggestion had nothing to do with your first sentence. It
The
was-
short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Okay,
And we
we
delayed-
separated them.
We separated them.
Yeah, now they're two separate things. Planning and zoning must consider economic impact on infrastructure and sources of the revenue needed to fulfill community needs. Does that say anything that's
Good enough.
Huh?
That's good enough.
That gets to
So-
Linda's point that the community is expressing its needs. I mean, that's what I hear in that, and that's where the power
How
comes
about
because
you?
the money.
Does that get
It's
it?
close enough.
Close
Well,
enough?
if I could
So do
say,
you want to second the motion?
I'll second it, sure.
Okay, this is just
Or
this
Myra
last,
can second it.
That's fine, you go ahead.
That's right. And we're making that into a motion,
okay,
which you just read. She
Right.
seconded. All in favor?
aye.
Okay, so we got that one captured.
Now, do we want to
Whatever
go
you
back?
wanna say.
We want to go back to this one about the short-term rentals, or
spell
let
it
that
out.
die?
yeah.
That died, okay.
Well, to me,
Okay.
it sounded like what you were trying to address was the economic impact on infrastructure, and to me it's a little unclear what it means to find a way to address community needs and how that's connected.
Yeah, me too.
What I'm hearing
I
is
wrote it,
that
and it's not
what I'm
clear.
hearing is that you're trying to mitigate the impact to that infrastructure.
That's correct. Isn't that right?
I don't think it's mitigate, it's pay for the impact.
Thank
I
you.
think that's another way of saying what I was trying to say,
Maybe.
but maybe being more clear is better.
Pay for is
Always.
a wonderful phrase.
Yes.
Like just straightforward.
Well, because we're in a budget, the commissioners,
Yeah.
pardon me, the commissioners go into a budget process. And what you're saying is, when we go into that budget process, you want the county board of commissioners, no matter who's sitting in those chairs on that dais, you want your county board of commissioners to be considering the community needs, the infrastructure, and how to pay for that. That's what I heard and what Dan said and what that motion says. I don't know if I read it into it because it's what I want to hear.
No, you didn't read it into it, it's what I was trying to say.
Okay, good.
Can we get this intensity of use in here? I like that phrase. Or is that a separate one, like planning and zoning should consider the
Economic impact.
intensity of use?
Well, that gets away from economic, the cost of it, which is what Dan was getting at.
It's a
Yeah, I
different
don't
way
think
to
we moved on to
It's
the
like,
next
yeah,
one.
it's
This
the
one already
same.
passed.
Oh, we're already done with this one.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
if we're
so we
using
want to
that
start
as
a
a
new
weighted
one?
value of things, then
Okay, help me out here.
it's
What are
just
we
what we
doing this
usually
time?
do.
It's a metric.
Linda,
I have issues
Linda,
with it
give
in
me,
some ways.
give me what you want to say. Huh?
Okay. So planning and zoning should consider, and this is a quality of life issue, intensity of use is is a little different than the cost. It's the quality of life.
The quality of life and neighborhood character or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's hard to measure. I mean,
Yeah,
That's
and
really
it's
hard.
like, it gets into some weird,
Yeah, people
social
live in
issues.
Think about how it will create enforceable policies or not.
yeah.
That's an important piece.
Yeah.
But again, these are aspirational goals,
But
and the translation of these aspirational goals into an ordinance
Right.
is not a topic for today's conversation, but it clearly is an issue that has to get addressed. But I guess I'm looking at that as a year from now when we get into the local comp plan and try to come up with something that we think would work in an ordinance. But at least if we get the aspirational goal down, I think we've made some progress.
I would agree. Well, I think one thing that is missing is a discretionary component to planning and zoning, because the county likes to go by the books. You know, if it meets the setback, if it does this, if it does that, approved. Okay. I think the community knows that there's more than just rules. There is a indefinable discretionary component to any home that's built, any tree that's cut down, any short-term rental if it changes the intensity of use. So I would like to see the comprehensive plan recognize that, I hate to say all, but really all planning and zoning includes some degree of all planning and zoning affects something. You get what I'm trying to say here?
You want me to try to get what you said the first time? Planning and zoning are to consider intensity of use pertaining to the quality of life and neighborhood character, period.
Are to consider the quality of life, including intensity of use. I mean, that's only one of
including, but neighborhood characters to be dropped, or is that?
So the issue I see as your commissioner, law applies to everybody. And I see you good neighbors sitting at the table saying, okay, we're in the position of setting standards that other people have to meet. Problem is, the law applies to everybody, including the people upon which you're seeking to impose those standards, and it all has to be legal.
But we're just throwing out ideas that everybody's going to review. This is just
But
kind of like
that's the issue for me.
putting mash in the colander, and whatever comes out at the end will be quite different, I imagine, right?
So,
Well, but the aspirational goals should be reasonably specific so that as we go through the process, we know what we want to have ordinances to support.
It has to be things that we can define, otherwise you're getting into the area of infringing on people's rights by applying rules that are really vague differently to different people, and I think that's a huge
That's what I was trying to say.
problem.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That was what I meant.
That's what I
You
thought.
actually need clear, definable
Yeah.
standards.
Okay.
If you don't have clear, definable standards, the county has no way to enforce it.
Right,
Yeah.
and if someone's bought a property and knows what the rules are, there can't be this like discretionary thing.
Well, for instance, if you buy a property in a CR zone and you go pick up the CR zone document and it says no commercial activity, then your expectation would be that there's no commercial activity allowed.
Right.
So, I mean,
Good thing.
and so commercial activity ought to be well defined.
Right.
Yes,
So that's the problem.
That's it.
okay. well,
So
then
what you're
write that-
saying is
write-
you weren't
write that down.
expecting this to
I'll
happen.
make a motion that
you know?
commercial activity ought to be well defined.
Perfect.
That's a good strategy.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
I go for that.
Okay.
And like
I'm not even
updated to reflect the changes of the last 20 years.
Well, but if you just say it neat
Yeah.
and clean like that, man, who can argue with that?
Yeah.
Somebody will, but
Right.
theoretically that should be a
Right.
common ground, because what we're looking for is common ground in this as well, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I need to go back to this thing that the county needs to have rules. Okay. Before the local ordinances were repealed, we had in RHK view protection. View protection was a criteria that was taken into consideration for type 1 and above. And that ordinance was repealed, and now the county will not consider view protection as a criteria. Okay, it should be in this community a criteria. So somehow I want to see something that says it's not just setbacks, but there are intangibles there that may need to be taken into consideration, like view protection.
How would you want to protect views? We would need to have something that spells out how they would be protected.
Well,
Not saying that you
There
can't.
may need to be rules,
So-
sure.
Well, then
but
that
this
can
is
be a goal.
aspirational.
So let
Fine.
me, in
And we
interest of
did
time,
it
yes.
for,
because we're about to run out of
You
time.
did it through the confines
Here
of
at
this, of the
RHK.
ordinance. You did it through the confines of 3.068.
you know.
No, you
So
did.
Linda, let me, in the interest of time, I want to pass the motion that I think Todd already wrote before we got on to the view thing, but I want to come back to the view thing. So can you read what you wrote on?
Okay, we got one here that says the term, quote, commercial activity, close quote, should be specifically defined.
Good.
That's a motion.
Second?
No.
It's fine,
That's fine.
Okay,
I'll second it.
so Linda seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So
Okay.
personally, I would like to see a motion that says that at least in the Southwest community, that view protection should be a criteria for type 1 and above approvals.
Yes.
It's part of the appraisal that the county uses when determining property values. It's measurable. An engineer can
It
measure.
absolutely is.
So,
Other jurisdictions do it.
well, and so why limit it to here? Because this is, again, where you can look for
That's
common
a really
ground.
good point. We
with
pay
other
taxes
neighborhoods.
Yeah.
on our views.
That's right.
I mean,
That's
the
right.
mechanics, again, I don't want to dwell on the mechanics, but there are other jurisdictions that have solved this problem, and they have mechanics for how you
So recommend-
measure and value views.
So make a recommendation that we go through that procedure
Okay,
so that we can then
we'll add
introduce
that.
it into the
Then they
ordinance.
will have a law. They will have a rule that they can enforce on your behalf if it's in the laws. They're not opposed to it. It's just got to be there.
I think Charles's point earlier was well made, which is that this, the implementation of the aspirational statement will happen later on. So if view protection is something that you want to be baked into the zoning ordinance, you could come up with an aspirational statement now. And what I heard you saying was that zoning needed to address intensity of use, quality of life, and neighborhood character. You could specifically add view protection if you
And
wanted
view
to.
protection.
Um,
Let's add it.
Include.
But the specific guidelines, whether it's height or lot coverage or a view corridor or something like that, those specific metrics would be something to get into when we're developing the ordinance. We don't have to get into those details today.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would suggest that we have it be, just speak to it at a county level, and then if the countywide one doesn't adopt this, then we can say, okay, let's try and do that here, since they didn't want to do it, because, I don't know, I have a nice view, and I don't live down here.
So did you get a motion out of this?
I did. Well, let me just make, okay, I'm going to just make this change so that I don't lose it.
Which is to say, I think it's an issue in other places.
The county, through the comprehensive plan, is to establish a rule by which to enforce view protection. Very short and brief.
Right. And it could be, if you're
So I will
modifying a
second that.
house, the silhouette doesn't change or something,
Do you want to second that or should I?
You go ahead.
I'll do it.
Okay, Linda seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let me read it again, make sure I have what you all think you have here.
Always
The
good.
county, I put some words in that I hadn't typed. Through the comprehensive plan is to establish a rule by which to enforce view protection. Is that what we passed?
That's what I heard.
Okay.
Didn't we have 4 criteria?
Well, I think Ian had,
Okay, I've got another one.
That would maybe be a separate motion. I don't know that
You
you.
already got
it
the
wasn't
other 3.
connected.
Well, the other 3, I don't think that there was any motion for. If you'd like to make one, I have it in my notes. But if you want to specifically make a motion to address intensity of use, neighborhood character, and quality of life, you could do that.
Okay, yes, we had all
But
of
if
those.
we amend this motion,
I think we had those in the prior motion, though, didn't we, Todd?
We passed this, we had some of those things in 2 motions, and I can put them all in one. So, planning and zoning are to consider intensity of use pertaining to the quality of life, including, what was the other one?
intensity of use, quality of life, neighborhood character,
Neighborhood character.
and view protection.
And protection of views. So this would kind of rescind the previous one we just did, but let's try this. Planning and zoning are to consider intensity of use pertaining to the quality of life, including neighborhood character and protection of views.
No, not quite.
I think the pertaining to and including could come out. From what I'm hearing, that might.
Okay, let's try. Planning and zoning are to consider intensity of use pertaining intensity of use. You want to take out quality of life? No.
No.
Well, let's see.
Just consider
Intensity of
the
use.
4 thing.
List the 4 things. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah. Yeah, so just consider
It
and
just
then let's
should
put
be,
forth
here,
the-
we can just have it on the tape and Ian will take a note. Planning and zoning should consider quality of life, intensity of use, neighborhood character, and view protection.
Yeah, they're all there. Okay.
So that's a motion I hear from Linda.
Sure.
Somebody want to second that?
Yes.
Todd seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. People have to leave at 12:30. I heard 12:30 is being kind of a dead date time. One issue that we haven't talked about that is close to my heart is wetlands and tree cutting. So we've kind of worked around protection of views. We worked around short-term rentals. Should we put something in here about tree cutting and wetlands?
On private property?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah. So, as an example, we used to have in Arch Cape a setback from the line of riparian vegetation of 50 feet. That got taken away back in 2017 when we made all the other changes. So that's an example of something that we could recommend get put back into the zoning requirements. And we could also recommend that, tree removal be subject to some review. And whether we say it's a type 1 or I don't know exactly what the best phraseology is, but I would sure like to see, again, in the quality of life sphere, I think it's important in this community to have a degree of regulation on tree removal.
Could you have it be like trees more than a certain size or
Yeah, we use
more than a
6-inch
certain
caliper.
percentage?
I'm fine
In
with
the
that.
past, we used 6-inch caliper.
Well, if this is aspirational,
Yes.
how about if we say that conserving trees and conserving wetlands, or existing trees and wetlands should be conserved.
I want to ask you a question. I had a big tree in my front yard. It was a danger. The arborist came and said, you know what, that tree's got
That's
trouble.
when you have an exception.
Yeah.
Well,
And
but
there's
if you would have
exceptions.
let me just tell you, this is my mother finger coming up now. If you had interfered with my ability to protect my home and my life by imposing delays or constrictions on my right to protect myself because I had a tree in winter storm season that I discovered through my arborist was a clear and present danger, I mean, I would have real problems with that because trees aren't just our friends. Trees can hurt us. So
We had a clause in the previous one that said if a tree is to be deemed a danger or dead, an arborist, it needed an arborist's confirmation. So you would have qualified.
I did not want to be delayed because the storms were here. The arborist came out. The storms were due in 2 days. And if you had delayed me and endangered my life and my property, I would have been very unhappy.
Yeah, I think the mechanics are going to take care of that
Yeah.
because all of the actual ordinances that I have read that address this issue of trees, they all have this clause in here that say, except if an arborist deems that this is a danger or something. I mean, you can't just say, the property owner can't just say, well, maybe I don't like that tree. I think it's a danger. I mean, there has to be some level of
I can tell you what it looks like
professionalism in it.
on the ground when people call and ask. And so what I tell them is that usually when they call, they have spoken with an arborist. And if they tell me the arborist has said this and it's dangerous tree, then I'm going to tell them, take it out immediately. Please send me the arborist's material.
Good.
But if the arborist has deemed it complete, take it down now.
And
And then, and I'll go ahead and backfill the information. And I'm assuming, of course, that people are telling me the truth.
Right, yeah, you are.
I am.
Well,
I
but-
don't have a choice, though,
We've
because if
had
someone
that-
tells me it's dangerous.
We had that happen where somebody claimed an arborist said a tree was dead, and truly it was not. It was quite alive, and he just wanted to cut it down.
Yeah, and so people sometimes do things fraudulently.
Yeah.
But I'm not in a position to be able to toy
Right.
with that. I just simply have to make the call. You're telling me that it's dangerous. You're telling me you have an arborist who's signing a piece of paper. You're going to email it to me. Take it down. I'm not going to stand in your way.
Yeah.
I'm not.
so did you capture the aspirational?
Yeah,
Well, I tried to. Let's see if I got what Linda was saying. Existing trees and wetlands are to be conserved, is what I had.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday, was it, or Monday, we sat through that workshop. And,
Monday.
Tim spent 2 hours telling us about exceptions to agricultural lands, and he never told us what the statewide goal and policy was. So I looked it up, and it was, the policy is to preserve the maximum amount of the limited supply of agricultural land. So it's a conservation policy. And then there are many, many exceptions to it, as we learned. So I think in here we should say that we want to conserve our trees and our wetlands.
Good.
You know, it's like,
You want to read the motion again, and then maybe we
Yeah,
get a
this is
second?
Linda's motion. Existing trees and wetlands are to be conserved.
Somebody want to second that?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, got that.
Also, a note on that topic, Goal 5 is coming up probably after the winter holiday break, so early next year. And Goal 5 deals with wetlands and open space and natural resources and things like that. So if you want to drill into that topic a little bit more, that'll be a great opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Okay,
Correct.
great.
Well, again, that's back to why I kind of struggled with this whole topic at the
Right.
beginning, because it seems to pop up
And it
so
will.
many other places.
I think
It
Linda
will.
made a good point that Goal 2 is a procedural outline for what the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance need to look like. And so it's easy to talk about all kinds of different things. But I just wanted to just restate that there will be more opportunities to address natural hazards,
Goal 7.
Goal 5 resources, Goal 16 and 17 resources, Goal 18 resources once we get into those goals.
Okay.
could you capture these things in the minutes now, even if they're not, maybe not quite on topic, and then we'll have them for when we get to the correct goal?
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So any committee members have other things that we want to bring forward in the last 15, 20 minutes we've got here?
What are some
You
of
know,
the ways
I-
that climate change should be addressed in the comprehensive plan? Are there any ways that impacts goal 2? I mean, it impacts all the goals, probably. So maybe citizen involvement. But is there anything we want to say about that at this time? Like,
Well, certainly, the only thing I can think of is that the comprehensive plan needs to include consideration of climate change.
right.
And maybe that's obvious.
It's so
and-
obvious, I don't know, we need to say it.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
it's going to do it, I think, in a few places. You're going to see some information coming to you in Goal 4. And absolutely in Goal 7. Goal 4 is forestry or forest lands. Goal 7 is natural hazards. It's going to come up again and again.
Okay, so maybe we can table that for now. That's fine.
It's going to be back. But you can talk about it now if you'd like.
We don't have to. I just think it's really important, so I don't want to lose sight of that. If we saw any ways that it was relevant to our discussions on goal 2, but if we don't, that's okay.
Where is the actual, I mean, this is kind of, goal 2 under the current comprehensive plan is kind of a mess.
Yeah, I looked for it too. I don't know that it actually spells out the goal in our current goal 2.
Right, it doesn't really seem to.
It's like,
Whereas goal 1 was very clear.
But the statewide goal 2 really just says cities and counties must have a comprehensive plan and implementing ordinances. So the county's goal 2 is in response to that and creates it.
well, I would say to recommend that the supporting documents be included via hyperlink or made accessible in the county's office or something, and not be included in the plan. I mean, needs to be that the supporting documents need to be accessible, but they do not need to be in the plan themselves. They can be incorporated by hyperlink or some other paper method. How's that?
Fine, you want to make that a motion? Supporting documents for the county plan? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
should be accessible.
Oops.
By hyperlink or other user-friendly method, but not included in the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it says here, the required information shall be contained in the plan document or in the supporting documents. And I kind of like the technological leap of using hyperlinks. Comes back to your point. I mean, if you follow the letter of the law, you end up with, 17 pounds of paper.
Well, one good example that comes to mind is the goal 12, which is transportation. And it requires that we have a transportation system plan. And goal 12 and the TSP were most recently updated in 2015. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right.
And so the transportation system plan is adopted by reference as part of the comprehensive plan. It itself is not in the comprehensive plan. It's adopted by reference. So I think that maybe is a good example of what you're suggesting. Is that right?
Yes, that's good. That's good. But it would be nice so that when someone goes to your website and looks at the comprehensive plan, they can click on a link and they can get to that transportation plan.
Yeah, it would be nice if there was like an executive summary in the plan itself. But I mean, someone could also go through, and I assume there's probably an executive summary in that plan.
In the transportation plan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they could read that. But
Yeah, I think it's like 4 pages or something.
Okay. Yeah.
So do we have any comments from the public? I wanted to make sure we
Wait, was that a motion?
We've let some of this stuff come in along the way.
Was that a motion?
It sounded like
Yes.
it.
Sure.
No.
Supporting documents should be accessible by hyperlink or other user-friendly method, but not included in the text of the comprehensive plan.
So moved.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Sorry.
Just came here to watch this.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Zoo.
And what do you
Ed,
think?
okay.
I have a question. I'm back on the wetlands. So there was a motion passed, I believe, saying that we're conserving and preserving wetlands. So does that prevent someone from coming in with a lot of money and filling in a wetland and making a subdivision? I mean, can that be done with this motion that has been passed saying, yes, we want to preserve wetlands? So does that actually prevent someone from filling it in and building on that? Is that what that
Not
means?
yet. I mean, I think we're making, what you're hearing us do is struggle a little bit in making some aspirational goals for our comprehensive plan. And then as you've heard the other discussion, this whole process with 18 goals, this is going to take us at least a year, maybe another year and a half or so to get through the 18 goals. And then once we get through the 18 goals, we turn to our own little planning area and work on a very specific comprehensive plan for this area, the southwest coastal area. Once that's done, then that would translate into actual zoning requirements that get put into a zoning document that might address what you just asked, because the way I look at things and interpret things today is today people could do what you just said. If you've got enough money, you can go to the DLCD and pay them X number of dollars and get your credits and go fill the property, fill the land. Can we change that by the time we get to the end of the process? I don't know, maybe. You know, I mean, to the extent that we can come up with a local zoning requirement that's tighter than the state requirement, I think we can. But I don't know the answer to that yet.
I have another comment. On type 1 activity, I believe, with public notice, I understand changing a light switch and blah, blah, blah is not necessary, but I want to know if someone is planning to put in a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom remodel in an already existing home, I want to be notified of that. Is that
Interior, no change in that.
interior?
I see.
Right. I know the exterior, there are limitations and notifications on building a shed and something exterior, but I feel if it's going to limit, or not limit, but change the activity of that home maybe into a rental home that was previously not, and they're planning on making a mother-in-law house on the bottom of their property that could eventually be rented out, and then you're going to have 10 cars parked there where there's only room for 2.
Right.
Something like that should be notified to the public so we have some input on that.
So the change in use and the intensity of the use.
Right, on existing homes, not just homes that are going to be built, or a shed or something.
But we kind of lost at the beginning. We started talking about conditional use permits being needed for bed and breakfast, but not short-term rentals. Maybe we should say something about any change in something should require a conditional, notice to the community and a conditional use permit. I don't know what you call what Diane's referencing, but
Intensity of use, I think, was the term used, which is good.
Well,
How do you judge it?
so right at the moment, we have something that tells us from attorneys that if you own a single-family dwelling, you can rent it out, regardless of the zone. It's the use and the enjoyment of your own home is to do with it this way. So right now, we're not calling it a commercial activity. So if somebody changes the use of the home, say they can, a change in use very frequently means like adding a home occupation to it, adding a bed and breakfast to it. I'm just thinking of residential zones that are specific more to this neighborhood. So those would be changes in use. At this point, that using it for a short-term rental is not considered a change in use. So we wouldn't, at this time, do a notification for it. If it were a conditional use, that would be a different story under the current regulations. But how that changes,
Well,
I
we've
don't know.
taken an aspirational goal to fix that.
Right.
And the short-term rental ordinance does require notification of surrounding property owners under certain circumstances, like in this area, for example.
Not prior
Yeah.
notice, I don't believe.
No,
I'm
just
sorry.
notification.
It's-
Notification, right.
Yeah.
It's subsequent notice, which is not.
Does that
very
mean
useful.
that, for her concern, that she would not know that they'd modified their house with this other bedroom and bathroom, but that when they went to get short-term rental, she'd be notified but not have any say in it?
After they would grant it,
After it was
short-term
granted.
rental permit, she would get notice if it was her neighbor.
As it stands,
No, I thought it was when they were applying. It's not when they're applying?
Well, this one's, Arch Cape's got a short-term rental ordinance that's different than the rest of the counties. So there is a notification, but I think it's pretty much simultaneous with getting the permit. So that you receive
It's a notification of
permit,
not the
right.
application.
It's, I believe it's supposed to contain contact information for the property owner or property manager so that you have somebody to call in the event there's an issue.
Nuisance or, yeah.
It's a letter that says, "Dear applicant," and then
Probably.
it says that a permit has been granted to such and such an address.
Yeah.
So,
Any other comments? Dan?
Thank you all for doing this. This is important stuff, and it's really good of you guys to spend the time and effort to do it.
I second that.
Thank you for coming. It
Yeah.
really helps to have some people from the community
Absolutely.
here.
your participation is really essential. We need it. I mean, without it, we'd be just the four of us sitting here having a conversation.
So next week, you go through number 3?
Next month.
Next month.
Or next
Month,
month?
yeah.
Next week.
Yeah.
All right, then I think we're adjourned.
I move.
There's one more thing on the
Oh,
agenda,
sorry.
if you don't mind. I've got background materials for your next meeting I'd like to distribute. I also wanted to mention that staff is working on dark sky ordinance and outdoor lighting regulations, and so we're going to hold a work session with the Board of Commissioners this fall. The date has fluctuated. It's still to be determined. We're anticipating it'll be in November, but the date has not yet been set. So we will keep you posted with more information about that, but I know it's been an issue specifically in the southwest coastal area with outdoor lighting and beach lighting and dark sky concerns and things like that. So I wanted you to be aware that we're working on it, and we will keep you posted when we know the date of the work session. On another topic, Gail and I have been working on the overall Goal 1 for the county, and part of our effort is to bring people in who have expertise on the subject matter of the various goals. So coming up, we have goals 3 and 4. Tim Murphy from DLCD gave the workshop on Monday to help give some more context and background information about what that goal is all about. We would like to continue to give those opportunities to the advisory committees to hear from experts like Mr. Murphy. So we have currently a list of stakeholder groups who we have invited to participate in this process. And one of the ways we've invited different stakeholders to participate is to give presentations to the advisory committees. So some presentations will happen at the county-wide meetings. For example, on Goal 1, we had a representative of the Lower Columbia Hispanic Council give a presentation on what community involvement meant to that group. We also had a representative from Clatsop Community Action give a presentation on citizen involvement as it relates to the population that CCA serves. So we would also like to offer opportunities for the planning area committees to have speakers come in. So if there are any farmers or foresters that you can think of who work and or live within the Southwest Coastal Planning area, who you think would be a good speaker to go over that goal, or if you think you've already heard enough about goals 3 and 4 from Mr. Murphy, that's also fine. But keep it in mind as we go through this process that part of your meeting could be getting a presentation from an expert or someone who's working in the field that's related to the topic that you're discussing. So feel free to send me ideas by email about who some good individuals might be to do those presentations.
Very good.
Yeah,
Good idea.
Yeah.
Are we going to have training sessions for each goal?
Probably
That's
not
set up for all of it, like
Not
the one we
necessarily.
have.
Not necessarily, but probably pretty close. Goal 5 is going to be huge for us. It's a massive goal, and we're probably looking at something of a hiatus for the holiday, and then coming back in January or February with probably a very large presentation for Goal 5. I don't know exactly that we have anything planned out for Goal 6 yet. 7 will probably have a pretty good presentation for too.
As you know, we know nothing.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. But we'll be fine tuning it. So a lot of these will have presentations. Oh, and Ian is being really modest when he tells you that there's a dark skies ordinance and the lighting ordinance going on. Ian's working on it. This is Ian's baby.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good job.
And for the committee members, I'm not going to be here for the next meeting, so
Yeah, I won't either, actually.
I asked her specifically.
That's October 16th or
for you.
October something.
Yeah.
Now, I did plan to call in
It's
for
October
it.
16th. Yeah, it's the
So
third, it's actually the third.
I'd be participating by phone, but I will not physically be here.
So Ian needs to be in on this conversation real fast.
Sorry, I missed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
say
so
it.
I will not physically be here for the next meeting. I plan to call in.
Okay.
And then Margaret said she would
But
not
I
be
need
here.
somebody to chair the meeting.
Yeah, and I believe I was supposed to be in an airplane, so.
Okay, so Todd is volunteered to chair the meeting for October.
So you're